right, then we're making funny faces, Paul.
Just don't turn them all on.
Right.
That's here. Don't turn them all on. He just doesn't want us to talk.
Yeah, he wants a hot mic.
Yeah. Yes, you don't want us to say, hi, public.
You know, that is kind of, I just wonder what they're going to find if he's got in touch with ISIS.
Good to go? Good evening. Welcome to the October 3rd meeting of the Arapahoe County Planning Commission. We do have all commissioners here except Commissioner Brummel, so we do have a quorum. We need to start with approval of the minutes of August 8th. Do we have someone who would like to make a motion for that?
Make a motion to approve the minutes of August 8th as written.
Okay, and do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Rick moved, and was it you? Ms. Letts has seconded for approval of the minutes of August 8th. Is there any comments on those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The minutes are approved. Okay, now we will go to the minutes for August 15th. Do we have a motion for the minutes of August 15th, Mr. Rader?
Yeah, I move that we accept them as written.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Zoll, did you second?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
I have a correction, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
It's noted that I was in attendance on August 15th, and I was not.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's a good catch. Okay. Any other changes to those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, the minutes are approved. Okay, we will now go to amend the comp plan to adopt by reference the Arapahoe County Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. And I actually have a question that I'm not sure, Ms. Yekas, I think I'm going to ask it of you. Okay. My question is, the comp plan is approved by the Planning Commission and is a document of the Planning Commission. I'm a little confused why the Board of County Commissioners is approving this when it's our document, not their document.
So this particular plan is similar to the Transportation Master Plan and the Open Space Master Plan that were handled the same way. The plans themselves are adopted or approved by the Board of County Commissioners for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it has to do with funding elements or something along those lines. And it might be that Brian Weimer or Ray Wynn can explain exactly why this one relates to the Board of County Commissioners as opposed to coming just to the Planning Commission. But typically you would see these in a reverse order. The board would have already approved the plan, as they did with the Transportation Master Plan and the Open Spaces Master Plan. And then the Planning Commission is actually amending the comprehensive plan to adopt that plan by reference as an element of the comprehensive plan. So we did that, I know some of you weren't here, but we did that in 2010 with both the Transportation Master Plan, the Open Spaces Master Plan, and then we also adopted some transportation studies the same way. So that's a little bit different than the sub-area plans, which only the Planning Commission approves, because those are more like smaller area comp plans, essentially.
Does state statute designate comp plans to the Planning Commission? That may be a question.
I'm going to say I was thinking that in Colorado the Planning Commission is designated as the authority. There is some language in there that says that regulations can be approved, which, those go to the county commissioners that, in a sense, have the effect of making it mandatory, but that's more of an optional thing, and maybe Bob, did you want to weigh in differently?
Well, actually the statute does, and I think the language is to the effect of it's the duty of the Planning Commission to adopt a comprehensive or master plan, is the way it's referred to in the statute.
For the record, I will be abstaining so that the Board of County Commissioners knows that, in my opinion, this should have come to Planning Commission for the approval, period.
As opposed to, well, before you make that decision, why don't you hear the presentation, and the folks that we have here who have worked on this plan might be able to answer your concerns before you actually make that decision.
Okay.
Let me address that.
Okay.
So Brian Weimer, Transportation Division Manager. So I've been before you before on projects, right? On the transportation plan, studies, particular. The comp plan is that overall document that kind of guides the way we want to do things, or the way you would like to do things, right? From the Board of County Commissioners' perspective, it helps us in terms of land use decisions that they may have, direction that we're going in terms of our capital programming, our maintenance programming, that are identified in these plans in terms of how do we want to move forward. I think it also helps us in terms of having two bodies saying this is a document that Arapahoe County utilizes. The board does not have to follow the comp plan, as you well know. But when we have it adopted by both, we are utilizing that information in terms of looking at land development review. You see a lot of policy-related issues that the Board of County Commissioners set policy relative to things. That's why both are doing it. Two different functions in terms of the way the county utilizes these plans, and that's why we take it to both. And that's what we've done in the past, and I think it's worked well for us in terms of establishing that type of criteria. The comp plan, helping planning guide development long term, the others helping us guide the overall county policy and how we're moving forward in terms of setting priorities and that sort of thing. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Okay.
Excuse me,
Is there,
Mr. Chair, did that help?
did it help? Because I know Brian for a long time. I guess I just do have concern. I can see how the board should be reviewing it and looking at it, but they're voting on it. I'm not sure why they should be, because legally they have no binding on the comp plan, only we do.
Right. So, or is it a matter of it doesn't matter whether we approve it or not because they're going to?
Somewhat. Because they're going to do it
I
anyway.
think the idea is to ask that this be incorporated into the comprehensive plan, which is your document. The bicycle and ped master plan it's more than just a comprehensive plan. So I don't think it's a matter of, they're going to approve it anyhow and force it down your throats. It's up to your decision as to whether or not it gets incorporated into the comprehensive plan. So that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the fact that the board could approve this or not approve it, I think you have the same authority. You can approve it or not approve it. Our feeling is that it is a planning document. Being such, let's incorporate it in the comp plan. Being such that is a master plan that's setting policy for the county, that's a Board of County Commissioner decision. Two separate decisions that aren't necessarily linked in terms of how they're utilized.
So
Fair enough?
what happens if we disapprove and they approve? Where does it sit?
Well, then it's a bicycle and pedestrian master plan for the county. It's just not incorporated.
It's not incorporated
And it
in the
wouldn't
comp
be
plan.
incorporated in, huh?
Yeah,
It would be nothing different.
because that is your document.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Maybe there's one other point I think I'd like to make. I'm Roger Harvey. I'm the planning administrator for open spaces. And so there's a whole open space side to this master plan. And Ray will go through with you guys that was an important element that he's going to go through and show you a prioritization of projects throughout the county. And as you may or may not know, we have an open space sales tax that gets distributed to the cities, and the county gets to utilize that for pedestrian and bicycle projects. This plan is a huge element to utilize and show the commissioners, because they are the approvers of the open space sales tax ultimately, through grants and through our funding of where these projects get funded. And that's one of the main elements that why we want the commissioners to approve this plan, especially for cities and jurisdictions that come in for grants. That's one of the main pieces that we want to see in open spaces to get direction on bike ped projects for funding.
So basically, you want their buy-off.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Because they are the ultimate approvers for the open space sales tax. We have an open space advisory board that makes advisory decisions to the Board of County Commissioners for grant projects, but ultimately the commissioners are the approvers. So that's a huge, important element of why we're having them approve the plan. I'd just like to say also, I'm up here, Ray's been working on this project for over 2 years now. And this is the culmination of a lot of time, and he's led this project for 2 years, and it shows what an incredible job he's done. This plan is really going to be a great document to guide us for in the future to really improve the safety and connectivity of bike and pedestrian throughout the county. So I really thank you guys for listening and being part of this process. Thanks.
So I can go into it a little deeper into the weeds and kind of explain, the thought process throughout. And I kind of see two different paths this plan is going down. So I see the role of the comprehensive plan we've identified throughout the entire, 2-year-long planning process, working with Jason on specific land use policies that will alleviate some of the inconsistencies we see with the sidewalks, with development, and that's one piece of it. And that's kind of the role of the comprehensive plan. We've developed these policies that, if adopted into the comprehensive plan, can help alleviate that with development. And then the other side of it is the on-street stuff. One of the things that I just gave you is a design guide, and what that will do is that will eventually influence changing street standards that the Board of County Commissioners plays a big role in. So it's kind of two different paths, and there's two different roles, and the idea behind the plan in general holistically was to have buy-in from you all for the comprehensive plan for the policies, specifically the land use related policies in the bike and pedestrian master plan. And there's also the street element, the prioritization ranking of projects in unincorporated Arapahoe County that the Board of County Commissioners ultimately approves. So combined holistically, that's how the bicycle and pedestrian master plan was designed, and that holistic approach, both on-street, off-street with open spaces and transportation, and also the land use side, is the other critical piece of the triangle. Does that make sense?
Okay. Maybe you can answer this as you do your presentation.
Yep. Sure.
Recently, we had an issue along Quincy where somebody was putting in a project, and we were many of us felt that they should put the sidewalk from corner to corner, and we were told they couldn't do that. Even though someone owned the land who was here and selling a piece of the land to someone to build on it, and we were like, what good is the sidewalk to nowhere?
Right.
When you're going to develop this whole thing anyway.
Exactly. And so
would this help deal with that.
Yeah, and that's where the prioritization of projects comes in too. We've prioritized the missing sidewalk gaps that connect, other sidewalks, especially along the arterial roadways, specifically. So,
but Arapahoe County shouldn't have been building that sidewalk. The developer who owned the land should have been putting in the sidewalk.
Right, and that's where the land use policies from this plan, if included into the comprehensive plan, can add some more teeth to that. So we can go through the specific policies if you want to.
That's one that's really bugged us, the sidewalk out of nowhere.
Yeah,
and this was
a huge issue.
Facility, and we were like, so you mean the people in their wheelchairs are going to ride through the dirt to get to the gas station?
Right.
Across the street.
Right.
Yeah, and that's something that we worked closely with Jason to develop some of the land use related policies in this plan that, if adopted into the comprehensive plan, can help alleviate some of that.
That's valuable, so.
And that's kind of what I'm talking about, the two different paths. There's like the land use policy path that will help, especially with the sidewalks, mostly. And then there's, the street policy stuff. And then there's also that prioritization where the Board of County Commissioners can say, this is a higher priority project. We should fund this over this. So I'll just jump into it.
Great.
So with that in mind, we're asking you to adopt the Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan by reference. We decided ultimately to include the design guide that I just distributed to you that was just created yesterday. And we were not able to give that to you prior, but that is one of the things that we wanted the Board of County Commissioners to adopt, because that could influence creating new street standards. So it doesn't so much influence the comp plan as it will the policies that we're going to talk about a little bit later. And then we have scheduled for the public hearing for the Board of County Commissioners on the 17th. So this will be adopted by reference from y'all until then, when they adopt it. Does that make sense?
Is that when they adopt
So you want us to adopt this even though we just got it right now?
No, what I'm saying is we originally had the hearing for the Board of County Commissioners to adopt just the plan without the design guide. We have decided since that we would like them to adopt the design guide as well, because that could influence the street standards that we could recreate later, but they would have to adopt that first in a separate process.
So they will adopt this, we will not.
Correct.
Because we just got it. So.
Correct.
But if they adopt this, then we have teeth to get our sidewalk in when we want it in, correct? What it says about sidewalks.
The design guides are tools. If you look at them, it talks about how do you address certain issues. It is a toolbox to address things. It is not an engineering standard, if you will. Those need to be adopted by the board, so there's more teeth that needs to go into that. So this is a tool that we can help guide development in saying, hey, if you have this issue, here are some tools to improve or enhance pedestrian and bicycle movement, safety, those sorts of things. So we will take the next step, okay, after the board adopts it as a guideline, and it's a guideline, not a standard. Yeah. We will take the next step to adopt it as a standard.
Okay, that was
okay, and those would be putting some teeth into them, requirements associated with it.
Good.
The policies that Ray has talked about, policy being, hey, right now our policy is you can build the street and adjacent development builds a sidewalk across their frontage.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
We're looking at it to be a complete street policy and a recommendation, so when you build the street, guess what? You build the sidewalk as well. So that we're eliminating gaps that are created with that. And in your staff report was an example one of the things that we're trying to do to help with that. So there's two separate issues here. That's the reason you don't need to adopt the guidelines, because the comp plan is more of a planning document. That's more of a guide to implementing the improvements.
This had been a standard when Quincy was widened by the developer. They would have had to put the sidewalk in then.
If the comp plan, once it's adopted as part of the comp plan, and then we have standards or the strategies and policies are adopted through the land use code, right, then that says this is what you have to build as part of your new development.
We would not even have had that as an issue. They would have built the sidewalks when they
Right.
widened the street.
If it's in the land
that they were required.
If it's a land use code requirement.
Right. That's what we have to go. That's what we got to shoot for.
And so those are the next steps. This is setting that up of the strategy, of the policy that we want to look for, and the strategies to obtain that policy. And that's what's all identified in the plan and in your staff report on how we want to meet that. There's additional actions that have to occur after that to make them standards as a requirement for development, and or this is the way you treat this certain situations. So right now we do have bike lanes. Okay, that's a roadway standard. We're going to make some modifications to those roadway standards. Could be width, could be other things that are in that design guide to enhance the mobility of pedestrians and bicyclists. So we're trying to make it safer, trying to enhance the use of those type of facilities. Does that make sense?
That is helpful. Thank you.
You may have already kind of answered my question in terms of, one of the things that I know comes up quite a bit as far as sidewalk continuity and that sort of thing is land ownership. If people do a phased takedown of a large parcel, they can't implement infrastructure on a parcel they don't own. So how would this, ultimately get down to a standard to address, let's say a phased takedown like we see in some of these larger, multi-phase developments where the PDPs come in segments?
I think he did answer that.
Mm-hmm.
He said when this is all approved, when the street was widened by the master
original
developer,
landowner would have
they would have had to put in the sidewalk then, and it wouldn't even be an issue.
So right now, as you see it, you have the original developer that's putting in the roadway, right? Curb together, maybe half width, whatever it might be, and there's no sidewalk along there. That's left to the final development plan or whoever comes in and builds. Our plan would be when you build this roadway, you build the sidewalk at the same time.
That
doesn't
solve our problem.
Sure it does.
Well, it would
No, it doesn't, because Quincy is already built. We want that sidewalk in. How could we force them to do it?
Well, then they have to come in and do that anyway. You couldn't force them to build the whole thing because this becomes active at the time of adoption. So everything going forward, you'd still have the same issue that we have now for that. You couldn't come back and say you have to do that, other than we've talked about some things in here in terms of gaps. So
Yes, that's what it is.
So one of the things that we've talked about is if it's going to an activity center, right? So Prosper is a great example. You have a school on the west side of Watkins. You have development occurring on the east side of Watkins. Okay? As part of that development agreement, we made sure that all modes of travel can get to the school. Even though the school might just be building, they need to make sure that sidewalks are there. They need to make sure that bike lanes are there, and they need to make sure that there's safe travel across Watkins. Mm-hmm. Okay? So that eliminates those barriers, those gaps, and that's part of the strategy. we may have issues like you just talked about. The roadways there, we're just going to have to deal with those as they come in. But I think some of the strategies will help land development say, hey, you need to provide this connectivity to another land use, which may mean you have to build that sidewalk to encourage that. Jason did a good job with your issue, and that developer was agreeable to providing some of those connections. The land use code revisions that we're recommending will make that job easier.
So like in the future, 6th Avenue may be built out, and they will make them.
No, that's cool.
do
Yeah.
the sidewalks.
But I still jump back to the situation on Quincy.
But
But is it going to happen?
Saying we can't retroactively.
But is it going to happen again?
If we adopt this,
No.
then
Once the land use code is adopted to address these strategies and these policies, that issue would be addressed.
So that's where we have to. That's what we're.
So it's the idea of complete streets.
Yeah.
The idea of complete streets is that you're addressing all modes of travel up front and not just car travel initially, and then sidewalks down the road. So does that answer your question?
Yes, I mean, I see a little bit of a logistics issue that I know the developers bring up, which is if I put a sidewalk in, I do finish before I do construction, then the probability that I will damage that finish, bringing my heavy equipment in and so on, because a lot of this is commercial development, I think somehow there'd have to be some provision to acknowledge that, because if it's not built out all at the same time, such that the sidewalk can go in smoothly, there will be damage to those facilities as the construction occurs over time. So
And there's damage that occurs to the curb and gutter.
Correct.
Damage that occurs to the roadway, and those are addressed
Sure.
by that developer that's creating that damage. So I think the trade-off is that you're providing that connectivity. Now, is that needed on all locations? Maybe not. But if you're having a large activity center, whether it be a commercial or let's say a residential area, maybe it's apartments, and you have commercial or schools over here, guess what? We need to have that connectivity.
Sure. And I can see that in those larger scale things. But, I know most residential developments, you put your house in, you pour the sidewalk in front of it, and they stamp it out as you go. So, I think you may have to look at just some specificity there when you get down to the point of standards.
Well, and when we get to standards, there's a whole public process. And that public process includes not only the general public, it includes our customers. And our customers are the development community, and they can provide that input as we move forward.
Because what we were talking about, our issue was commercial, not residential. This is commercial, it's a safety.
All of these policies specifically refer to arterial streets.
Yeah, but it's commercial. It's owned by a company, and it's.
What would you let Ray make his presentation?
Okay. Anyway, sorry.
So
That's okay.
there's a lot of detail in this in terms of policies and strategy.
So these are the visions and goals of the plan. That one, we can't get this one. Sorry.
okay, so this is like The Voice. We all turn.
Yep. So I presented the vision and goals at the last presentation, but we have them in these categories for biking and walking activity, access and connectivity. And one of the things that we did is we changed the access and connectivity goal to include that last piece of the sentence in red, and is free of barriers, because what we've also found is that in certain cases, roadways are constructed that create a barrier when the pedestrian facility could be included in that construction at a far reduced cost during construction than retrofitting it afterwards. So an example of this is Watkins Road. It'll split a Prosper development with residential on the east and a school on the west. So there's an opportunity to have, a pedestrian underpass built in that roadway construction when the road's being constructed, rather than create a barrier where we have to retrofit that an exponential millions and millions of dollars more after the fact. So these are some of the major technical tasks. Since I last met with you, we have done the last two, the implementation plan, which includes the land use policies for the comp plan. We've also identified education, enforcement, and encouragement programs, which were a big theme throughout the planning process that we heard from all of the public input. If you remember, we created a project advisory committee because people don't use trails and sidewalks within a single municipality. You know, they're going from unincorporated Arapahoe County to Aurora to Centennial. We created a project advisory committee that had all of the municipalities as well as the agency partners that surround Arapahoe County and the other counties and municipalities as well. And so it was important to collaborate with people like Jefferson County, Denver, to make sure our plans are aligning with what they're doing. So we had extensive public engagement throughout this whole process, and the public engagement has really identified the backbone of the network that we are proposing. The highlights in red, we had 1,500 residents participated for 5+ minutes in the telephone town hall. I've been outreaching to 15 local businesses regularly, just about every quarter, going out to them, promoting public meetings. We had 440 location-specific comments, which were where people could have a blank map of the county and they could drop pins at specific places in the county where they thought that there was either inadequate, missing, lacking bike and pedestrian infrastructure. We reached over 35,000 people through social media, and we had approximately 125 attendees at our meetings, including an extra meeting that we added on just for the residents of Aurora. Another thing that influenced the network that we're proposing is an online survey that we created, and the two questions that were specific to the network were which improvements would encourage you to walk more for both walking and biking, and the top three were more facilities, so sidewalk and trails, routes that avoid high traffic areas, and safer intersection crossings, which were also the same for the bicycle results as well. This is a combination of all of the public input. So this is what the public told us through all of these different mechanisms, through social media, through that map that I was talking about earlier, online comments, survey responses. And the top was new facilities, whether that be new sidewalks, new bike lanes, better connectivity, so better connection of what currently exists, those current networks. A lot of positive feedback. A lot of people really are utilizing and enjoy the network we have. They just wish it was better connected and there was more. And then a key thing was user etiquette. We've heard, that the motorists, the cyclists, the walkers, nobody is paying attention to anybody else. Everyone is in conflict. So that's where that education and enforcement kind of piece comes in at the end. So again, this public input, these are kind of the tiers of public input that we use to inform us about, where are these missing connections, where are these network gaps, and then that graphic up on the left is a shot of the web-based commenting map that I was referring to earlier. And so the gold ones are concentrations where there's numbers. There's like 16 comments in that specific location as you zoom in. More, so it was very geo-referenced. So then the other piece of it, there's the public input piece that informs the network. The other piece of it is a low-stress network. So the whole goal of this is there's about 51 to 56% nationally of the population that are interested in riding bikes, but they're very concerned for their safety. So a way to address that is to create the lowest stress network possible. The middle, the enthused and confident, they're going to ride whether there's really a facility or not. And the Lance Armstrong folks, they're going to ride no matter what. I mean, those are the guys that like ride down Arapahoe Road. But, in order to be effective and to get more people actually utilizing the system, we need to target this interested but concerned crowd. And the way to do that is to, decrease their level of concern and increase their interest. And the way to do that is through low-stress facilities. So what we're talking about is a level of traffic stress, which can actually be measured through roadway volumes, roadway speeds, roadway widths, and you can get this very scientific level of traffic stress. And as you can tell, the red roadways are roadways you would not want to walk or bike down. Arapahoe Road, Smoky Hill, Chambers, E470, kind of no-brainers. We're trying to focus on the green areas, those low-stress areas, and where those can be connected through low-stress on- and off-street trail networks to get people moving through the system. So we're also focusing on, what have other people created already. So we vetted the current infrastructure through the Public Advisory Committee. What are people planning? And kind of going through all the stuff and where are the connections at. So consideration of existing cross-sections for feasibility, maximum spacing of 1/2 mile. That's to avoid redundancy. So we didn't want facilities being really close to each other to maximize efficiency. Emphasis on connection to schools, transit, and trail systems. Focus on, again, that low-stress facility, public input, and then previously proposed facilities from other municipalities. Yes?
Can you back up?
Yep.
Do we consider this safe? That I do when I ride. Do you consider that safe just to have a...
You do, depending on that level of traffic stress. So for that particular street, that's going to be like your neighborhood street. And all that marking does is it just identifies where you should be as a bicycle and also allows cars to know that that's where bicycles are going to be. So this facility works really well on those neighborhood, really low-stress streets. You could also accomplish the same exact thing just by identifying that as a route, just with signage. It's that level of stress indicator. So if the street is a little busier, so like Havana over here that goes from Peak View to Cherry Creek, that has a bike lane on it, but it could very well easily have this, but the traffic level is such that with a bike lane on it, it reduces that stress level considerably. Mm-hmm. People just feel a little safer when there's a little more traffic with this, and when there's not so much traffic, that's a level of stress that's acceptable. So that's kind of where you do it. Denver recently got a whole bunch of bad publicity from putting this kind of marking on Martin Luther King Boulevard. That's inappropriate. And that's kind of I'll talk about it in a couple more slides. But we've identified where these markings are appropriate and where they're not. Yeah, on page 26 of that design guide, it speaks a little bit to that. Does that make sense? I'm going to keep going. So on the flip side of that was the on-street, the trail network development, we had some of the same considerations. We also examined ownership and public land corridors just to identify some of the ownership issues that we would run into with off-street trails. So this is the proposed network countywide. It's really hard to see. This kind of highlights the eastern portion, though, where we're identifying corridors without identifying or singling out specific land ownership as to possible future corridors. You know, Cherry Creek 50, 60 years ago kind of looked like this, and as development came in, you know, you could identify if this was a good corridor for a trail. But without identifying that and letting development come in, it's a little harder to retrofit afterwards. So we just wanted to kind of identify these corridors. These are all drainage corridors in the eastern part of the county. And then this is the western part of the county. So this is the on-street bike and trail network. We have the existing trailheads, proposed trailheads, existing bike and pedestrian overpasses and underpasses, and also the proposed bike, pedestrian overpasses and underpasses. And as you can see over here, it's hard to see, but these little graphics show you what that facility looks like. It's easier to see in the plan and when you can zoom in a little more. So this kind of shows you what those are. If you notice, 4 out of the 6 are just paint. And the reason that they are just paint is because we've identified those in those low stress areas. So Paul, like you were talking about, where those, you know, just markings on the street here are appropriate, or on those neighborhood connections that will connect to existing trail systems, that you don't need something like this. And
Really nice.
yeah, but you don't need that, you know, if you would need that like on Arapahoe Road, but you don't need that on Peakview. And that's why by all of these are the ones that require paint, and you can see the orange is the proposed. So almost half of the proposed facilities that we're proposing, because we're using a low-stress network, only require paint. And that can be done through resurfacing projects. As the roads get resurfaced, you can restripe them. And that's kind of where those standards would come into play a little later. So when the whole network is built out, we can envision a regional system. This would be like the bicycle highway. And this is all of those low-stress networks connected. This big one in the middle here is Quincy, and that's identified as a widened shoulder. All of the stuff out east we've identified as widened shoulders that can accommodate bicycle facilities. But the rest of this is all utilizing either existing on-street through retrofitting it into that low-stress facility, or just using that paint. Like I said, half of the facilities are just paint-related. So this is the total projects that we are proposing with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan. There are 654 total projects. 93 are arterial sidewalk projects. So we figured out where the gaps in the sidewalks are. One of the great things about this plan and this process is we have recorded and we know the size, the width, whether it's attached or detached, of every square inch of sidewalk in all of Arapahoe County. We focused all the recommendations on the arterial sidewalks because people don't feel as stressed in their neighborhood, but when they get out to the street, the arterial streets, that's when they really need those facilities. Yes?
The design standards, because when I write, the worst ones are the old narrow sidewalks that are not detached. Is that something that can be addressed in the land development code?
Mm-hmm. We have identified all of the they call those substandard sidewalks.
And they're very dangerous.
Right, that are less than 3 feet.
Along Spear Boulevard in Denver, you are taking life in your hands.
Yeah. You know, in my neighborhood where I live in Denver, it's all 3 feet sidewalks with rollover curbs. So it's, you know, I'm walking in the gutter pan. But before this plan, we didn't know where those are. Now we know. You know, and
is there an ideal width of a sidewalk for a new development? Because if you And my other problem has come up because fencing sometimes comes right up to the sidewalk.
You've hit it, I've hit it.
And then people with strollers end up going down in the street.
Sure.
And nails come out of it. I think somehow, and it's probably not your thing, but the fences need to be required to be set back off the sidewalk because two people can't walk by.
Right. Yeah, so the minimum right now is 4 feet. Right, Brian?
What's the ideal one?
Well, ideally you'd want at least 6 feet.
Okay.
But, that's again where the policies here can start influencing changes in those standards.
If it's detached,
the
narrower one can work. But when it's attached, it's almost, you have to walk on the road.
And some of those become design standards. Okay?
Right.
Not only design standards for the roadway, but design standards from a land development perspective of, do we put detached sidewalks in?
Right.
Do we require that? On certain roadways, we do. The minimum requirement for us to meet ADA requirements is a 4-foot sidewalk. We will probably recommend something in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 feet, depending on where we're at. Local roadways, right? Your neighborhood roads, those are currently roughly 5 feet. They're like 4'11" if you have the rollover curve. So they're kind of there. We're talking about maybe adding a foot on top of that. And then obviously along arterials, we're looking at in the neighborhood of 10 feet because we're recommending, on a lot of the roadways, we're recommending multi-use trails. So you can use it for both bike and pedestrians. And that minimum would be 10 feet according to the plan.
I mean, can you recommend the detached other than on the arterial?
In a neighborhood, that could be a design standard within the land use code of how our planning wants to move forward.
Necessary all the time, but long term, it really makes a difference.
There's some benefits from it from an ADA perspective, and that is, I'll get into the weeds real quick, but where you have a curb return and you have a handicap ramp that's kind of angled, right? It doesn't direct the visually impaired individual directly to the other handicap ramp. So it becomes difficult when you have attached sidewalk to do that. Detached sidewalks are a lot easier to deal with. So there's some give and takes when you start looking at ADA accommodations, and that is a perfect example of directing that individual directly to the handicap ramp, whichever way you want them to go. Does that make sense?
So we're building new handicap ramps or rebuilding some places. One was done, I'm on a corner last year at my house. Why did they not make that go aimed straight across?
Because those are very difficult to do when you have attached sidewalk. Yeah. Because now you create this big giant handicap ramp, right? And it's all grades and everything else. So we're trying to retrofit to meet the grades, and it becomes very complicated. But if you require detached, it's so much easier to do. It's difficult when you have attached sidewalks. So, long story, excuses, but it becomes difficult.
Straight across.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not sure I've seen them even do. No, I'll be watching.
So there's 339 on-street projects and 222 trail projects. So we didn't want to lose track of the fact that, look, we're already doing some of this stuff. These are the funded projects that are identified in the plan that we're already doing. So we didn't want this to get lost that, we haven't been doing anything. These are all the projects that are funded.
Did we have to pay for the one on E470? Or is the E470 paying for it? Well, that was a good question.
That's a good answer.
So, the E470 trail they paid for, anything outside of their right-of-way, they don't really concern themselves with. So we are paying for the connections, the 6 connections. One of those would be to Piney Creek, too. So the Piney Creek Trail will now connect to the E470 trail. We're still working through that right now, and that's been an ongoing can of worms. But we have identified that we're going to go ahead with the 6 connections, including the Piney Creek connection. It won't coincide with the same construction timeline the E470 is on, but they'll be done better. Just put it that way. So we have all these projects, 654 projects. What do we do with them? So since we last met, we did an evaluation criteria, and the criteria directly correlate with the goals. So for biking and walking activity, through data collection and mapping, we're able to identify the pedestrian and bicycle demand. So those activities that Brian was talking about, with the current infrastructure, is there gaps to get people from the activity centers to the current infrastructure to places like RTD station, light rail station, buses, how many buses go, how many places. So we've mapped and collected all that data to create that demand. Access and connectivity, so barrier elimination, I spoke a little bit about this. That's usually a major roadway that's a barrier. It could also be a major hill or something like that. Gap closure, so gaps between the 2 systems that are already created. Closing those gaps gets you a higher score. Regional routes, as opposed to neighborhood routes, that gets you a higher score. Number of bicycle and pedestrian crashes for health and safety, that's something that is recorded. It's not reported as well as it should be, but it's all that we have. So we gave you a higher score for that. And then the land use context. So we were able to identify low-income and minority populations. And to go along with that, we've also can identify through census data households without access to automobiles, so people that actually need to rely on this transportation network more than people with cars. And then land ownership for the trail context, so public versus private.
Are schools, is that regional routes?
So schools, those can be considered regional routes.
When the elementary school kids are riding on their bikes,
yeah,
middle schoolers.
So that kind of goes back into that demand. So the schools, that is considered more of an activity center. One other important thing that came out of this process was that we've determined that open space funds can be used when connecting a regional trail, a trail to a trail, or connecting to a school, as long as the facility is off-street. So if it's a detached sidewalk, if it's an attached sidewalk, as long as it's outside the curb-to-curb line, open space funds are available for that. So that was something that we clarified through this process.
If we were Denver, who's got huge gaps, and this were us, we could be using that to fill the gaps.
If it's eligible, yeah. So the project prioritization results are the high priority projects for trail facilities. These are the categories: on-street bike facilities, arterial sidewalks, grade separated crossings, and trailheads. Priorities are broken down by municipalities, and we also did the top 5 highest ranking projects that are identified for each municipality and unincorporated Arapahoe County. And that's what I'll get into next. So these are the high priority trail projects for unincorporated Arapahoe County. And then these are the high priority on-street bike projects for unincorporated Arapahoe County. Florida Avenue, open spaces, creating a park on the corner there, and we're going to purposely take people off of the Highline Canal up through the park up to the intersection of Florida and Uinta, because that bridge there is part of the reason why that Florida Avenue is number one. So, but the whole thing needs to have a bike facility, but we're trying a little bit at a time. The high priority arterial sidewalk projects. So these are the major arterials that we've identified as being high priority for sidewalks. And there's also, these cost estimates are very rough, but it gives you a little bit of an idea of, okay, these are what some of these could cost.
So when you have a project that's $20,000, you just hurry to do that and get it done? Because that's easy.
Sure. I mean, so you could make the case that, look, this is some low-hanging fruit here. It's ranked, third. It's only $20,000. These are some responsible agencies,
Nothing.
Go ahead, Brian.
Nothing's easy. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, can I point out that this partner here is not very easy?
Okay, so what complicates a lot of these is, do we have the right-of-way to actually build it and acquiring the right-of-way? The cost might only be $20,000. That's not a whole lot. It's, do we have right-of-way? Are there utilities in the way? Like utility poles, can we get around them? That's why it looks easy, but I don't want, it's a case-by-case situation that we have to look at to see how do we implement these things.
The physical cost is $20,000, but the cost of implementation could be a lot more.
Yeah, because we didn't get down to that foot level in terms of what are all the issues that we have to deal with. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't want you to think, because it's a lower cost, it's easier. It may be more difficult than the $1 million project, right? So
they might end up with the same cost.
Yeah, it includes staff time. Then these are the high priority grade separation projects. So these would be the overpasses, underpasses. And that's, again, to get around those barriers. Whoops. And then these are identified as trailhead projects that are priorities. And these, we built trailheads from $200,000 all the way up to $1 million. So the cost, kind of varies. One of the other things that the plan does look at, too, especially with pedestrian improvements, is they identified land use typologies specific for Arapahoe County. So they give us some possible solutions to problems that occur in these different land use typologies. So it gives us a good kind of starting point of, okay, how do we address some of these different land use typologies in the pedestrian realm? And this is the design guide that we've been referencing and that I talked about earlier. Again, it doesn't have a lot to do with, if you did not want to incorporate this in the comprehensive plan, it wouldn't matter all that much. This is more for identifying some of those standards that are needed later down the line. But again, we wanted to get this in for the Board of County Commissioners so it can be used to identify those standards later without having a whole separate process.
A lot of these, I would assume, are national standards based on these. So everybody's used to it.
And in the appendix, it has all of these are the footnotes, the references of where all these came from. And those are also, along with the methodology behind the whole prioritization process, behind the low-stress network, that's all identified in the appendices of the plan. So if we want to go back, say, in 10 years and recreate this, we can use the methodology in the plan to recreate this. So this is education, enforcement, and encouragement recommendations. Again, like I said, one of the major key themes from the public engagement that we heard from the public over and over and over again is, the automobiles don't know, they don't they don't respect me as a cyclist. The cyclists don't respect the automobiles, or are very unpredictable. We got that a lot. So there's a big education deficit basically on all sides, from pedestrians to cyclists to motorists. And these are some of the ways that we can work to get over that and improve that and make that a little better. The League of American Bicyclists has a lot of great things, and that's what these are all coming from, is some of their programs. So the policy recommendations, modification to the county's land development code require developers to construct bicycle and pedestrian facilities and amenities. That gets back to what we're coming to y'all for. Adjustments to the county standards and processes to facilitate implementation of projects. That speaks a little more to the street design standards and how the design guide will affect that. And then coordination between Arapahoe County and other agencies and organizations to implement projects and programs. Part of my role going forward with the Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan is to engage with that PAC committee, the Project Advisory Committee for the municipalities and in Denver, to say, hey, have you guys, completed any of these things that are in the prioritized projects, to update the data that we have, and to move forward with keeping that data up to date and kind of identifying some of those prioritized projects. So here's where we're at. We are here tonight with the Arrow, the Planning Commission, hearing for potential adoption into the comp plan. Again, like I said, then we're going to the Board of County Commissioners hearing for potential adoption on the 17th. So this will be adopted here in reference, and then when the Board of County Commissioners adopt it, then it will be into the comprehensive plan. And then we are seeking adoption and letters of support from our Project Advisory Committee, so from the municipalities within unincorporated Arapahoe County. We already have some that are chomping at the bit to adopt it. We have some that don't want to adopt it, but they want to use all of our information to come up with their own plan, which is perfectly fine. And we have some that don't officially want to recognize it at all, but they want our data. So, yes, Paul.
Okay, I'm still confused. If we adopt this into the comp plan, why is it not final that it's adopted?
It is in the
into the comp plan.
It is.
Because you just said it's in reference if the board, no, if we adopt it, it's adopted.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. There was some.
If the board does it, that's no problem. But if we adopt it,
It's two separate processes.
Yeah.
right.
Separate.
Okay. So just so you.
Thank you.
Okay. That's it. If you want, I can go through all the policies one by one that are in the staff report.
I think we've talked about one of our big concerns here, which has been sidewalks.
Okay.
We've been fighting about that a lot recently with developers when they've been coming. So we would love some teeth.
So if you look at our staff report, and that would be on page 10, under policy 5, county requires developments to provide internal pedestrian connections with the direct access to neighboring land uses, schools, trails, transit service. Okay, there's strategies on how to do that, of which we talked about the land development code revisions, those sorts of things. Talked about cash in lieu adjustments that open space would get, and then strategy 5.3, modify the land development code to require pedestrian connectivity to adjacent neighborhood, employment centers, commercial areas, and schools from new development. And then policy 6 goes into design and constructing sidewalks, pedestrian crossing treatments based on the appropriate land use topology. And those land use topologies were, is it in a residential area, is it in a commercial area, is it near a school, all those sorts of things. So I think those are starting to address your issues in terms of high-level policy. Then we'll have strategies. Then we'll get into the detail with the land use code as to how it's written and the requirements that are associated with it.
So
the whole land use code component will be a whole separate action that the Board of County Commissioners ultimately approve. You will make recommendations. They have approval authority. Then that will also then go into engineering standards that Chuck and his group will be utilizing as they review plans.
I have a question. So I know, for example, the comp plan is considered a 20-year document. So as far as the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, what is the lifespan on that? Because one thing that occurs to me is right now we've identified low-stress arteries. You know, as traffic increases, is there any mechanism built in that, you know, are you going to monitor or count or, you know, see if those things stay low stress and if the policy you've implemented there, you know, the type of bike lane, et cetera, is that still appropriate for that street? You know, so is there going to be any kind of ongoing monitoring of, you know, these projects and whether or not demographics have changed? What should
yes, and part of including the methodology from the consultant is so we can go back and readdress some of these things. We haven't determined a specific timeline, like in 5 years, 10 years. The idea behind, so that total build out of that network, we probably anticipate will be, you know, in the 20 to 30 year time frame. So, you know, we are going to have to go back and readdress some of these things. It could go the other way. You know, we could all be driving autonomous vehicles in 10 years and, you know, everything's low stress. Or we're flying. Who knows?
As all the baby boomers retire, there could be wheelchair lanes.
Right. But yeah, the idea is to be able to not only with going back and updating some of this stuff, but also as priorities shift, you know, some of those prioritized projects might become more important as different funding sources become available, as different things happen. So that's why we're going to reconvene with our partners, probably on a yearly basis, if not us every 6 months, to try and, you know, decide, okay, you know, are we still going on the right path? Have we started knocking off any of these projects? You know, what's changing and adapting that way. But that was an important reason why we wanted the complete methodology of, okay, how did we come to this? So even if, you know, there's staff turnover, there's that knowledge transfer as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yes.
I'd just like to say that I think you have done very thoughtful, very thorough work on this. Yeah. And the presentation was great. So absolutely. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's something I'm personally passionate about.
You know what done a lot. Men bikers in spandex don't understand that people get old and can't hear them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they go on your left. And you
they've given out.
They don't go on your left. On your left. It's like see
blow by you.
We've given out 600 bells in the last 2 years. Like
and also the people who open their car door. And I wonder sometime if they know where it's coming.
Well, that's funny that you mentioned that because that's where that marking comes into play. That marking in the street was specifically because to prevent dooring from happening. Bikes didn't know where they should be at, and to be 3 feet away from a car, and then to also let automobile drivers know, okay, bikers need to be this far over.
They may be coming.
Right. So that's why that whole marking was created. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dooring.
Where do you is there a published list of the most dangerous intersections for accidents?
So we can stay away from them?
I would like to know where they are.
So we do have the accident data that we use for prioritization, so for injury and death. And Brian knows more about that than I do because that's on street.
Yeah, so we have accident information going back to 2007. We'll be starting a local road safety plan. And that safety plan will take data from the last 5 years and analyze it in terms of in terms of safety. I don't want to say, and I don't want you to think that because there's more accidents at this location, that that's the most unsafe, because we use analytics with it based on the amount of traffic that you have. So you might have an intersection that has a lot of accidents, but the volume is significant.
Right.
And what we do is we create a level of service safety that looks at how many accidents, the type of accidents, so severity, and the volume and the type of intersection it is, and compares that throughout the state of Colorado. And then we can see, is it above the curve or is it below the curve? And therefore, then we can take that information, the type of accidents, and come up with mitigation for that and determine what's the best way to deal with that issue. That safety plan will make those recommendations, and that should be starting at the end of this year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If we have no further questions, we will have the public hearing.
Just a couple of things I forgot to mention at the beginning of the meeting, that this has been noticed as for a public hearing. So this was noticed in the Villager, and then we provided secondary notice in the I-70 Scout as well as a comprehensive plan amendment. So you do have the jurisdiction for the hearing. And one other thing I just wanted to note, based on some of the discussion that was occurring about, well, what if we don't approve it but the board does, and what if we do approve it but the board doesn't? The way the recommended motion is written, this would only become effective as a comprehensive plan amendment based on, well, it says with an effective date based on approval by the Board of County Commissioners. As that is worded, if you approved it and then they didn't, that effective date would never happen. So I did ask Mr. Weimer whether that really matters or not. You know, if you wanted to approve it regardless of what the board does with it, if we could just take that phrase out. And he said that would be fine. So just wanted to point that out before we got too far down the road and I forgot to mention it. Thank you.
Okay. Because we will open the public hearing. Is there anyone here from the public hiding back there who would like to address the Planning Commission? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and bring this back to Planning Commission for discussion and or a motion.
I would like to echo Diane's comments. There's obviously a lot of work has gone into this, and I think it's going to be a tremendous benefit to sidewalks and people who use them.
Oh, yeah. I think it'll be a benefit for us when the standards are adopted.
The standards
because then it's enforceable in issues we've been concerned about. Hopefully won't be an issue because when they come to us, it'll already be resolved.
So it seems like we need to change the motion.
Someone can do it. Why don't you?
No.
Go ahead and make the motion and
we need to take
do
that
what
out.
you said. You're right.
When Brian said we could do it, we take
You're
it
right.
out.
So make the motion and do that.
No.
I'll make the motion.
We have to
make the motion. Okay. Let's see. In the case of F17-002, amendment of the comprehensive plan and project C15-004, Arapahoe County Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan, and incorporation of such into the comprehensive plan, the planning commissioners have read the staff report and received testimony at the public meeting. I agree with staff findings 1 through 4, including the Arapahoe County Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan and attachments 4 in the staff report. dated September 26, 2017. Carried.
So that leaves out the part.
Yes, that's the end of it, right there.
I would like to second the motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I think we have to go and move to approve the Arapahoe County Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan for adoption by reference as an element of the Arapahoe County Comprehensive Plan, period.
Okay, do we need to say by reference? No.
Well, I think we have to say for adoption as an element of the Arapahoe County
I will
Comprehensive,
accept that.
rather than just agreeing with.
Okay, I will accept
And then delete the rest of that in the
Yes.
sentence.
that. Okay. Do we have a second to my motion?
I second the motion.
Okay, Ms. Rick seconds. Do we have any discussion on the motion? I think this is great because then we approve it into the comprehensive plan.
Effective right now.
It's effective when we vote. We've done our job.
Point of order, do we need to amend it officially since it's written differently?
No, because we never made that as a motion.
Okay, perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
We excluded the parts we didn't want in the motion.
We didn't like.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing done. Passed 6-0 and adopted into the comprehensive
And
plan.
it's effective as of this moment.
Yes, it is done.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good work.
We'd like to see that.
Yeah, that's continuing. That's my job.
So before you adjourn for this evening, I just wanted to let you know that Alan White did spend quite a bit of time last week making some changes to the plan document. Julio and I talked about that today, and I think what we're going to do is run a comparison between the referral draft, which is what you had received originally. That's the draft that was sent out to referral agencies, and the updated version so that you can see what the changes are. You don't necessarily have to reread the whole thing, but at least you can flip through and kind of see where some adjustments have been made. So that might take a little bit of time. It might be that we don't actually get that to you until your next meeting, but we'll try to get it to you ahead of time. And then I will also be sending you all of the referral comments that we got, which we had discussed at the last study session, that we would provide those to you. So I know we talked about the possibility of having a special meeting on October 24th, but it looks like we don't need to do that. We don't have any public hearing items on October 17th, so we're just going to use the next regular meeting as a study session. So thank you for that willingness, but I know we've been doing a lot of extra work, so hopefully this helps out. We won't need an additional meeting. So do you all have any questions either for Jason or for me? Looks like Jason might. Oh, yeah. Jason does have something to go over with you just quickly on oil and gas situation.
Walk and talk to save time.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, so Diane Kosis, our oil and gas specialist, received these emails from the Watkins Task Force, which is a group of neighbors who are concerned about oil and gas development in the Watkins farm area, and requested that these email correspondences be passed along to the members of the Board of County Commissioners and the Planning Commission. So I am passing these along to you for your information. A lot of the concerns have to do with traffic and maintenance on the roads, interactions between oil and gas traffic and standard residential and rural traffic. And those are things we take very seriously, and in fact, we have engineering coordinating with our road and bridge folks who review these sorts of applications to ensure that safety is maintained on the roads. And part of our memorandum of understanding with oil and gas operators is that they will survey the roads before they start operations, and we'll keep an eye on that throughout the process to make sure that they restore the roads to their pre-heavy oil and gas truck traffic standards. So wanted to share that with you and also let you know that a lot of these concerns have to do with kind of the engineering side of things, and we do have engineering staff who take that seriously and look at those.
And so they're talking to Conoco?
Right, and some of the oil and gas wells that are mentioned in the emails are going through an administrative process. It's highly unlikely that these will result in public hearings, but they requested that you be made aware of them, and I'm passing them along.
But in reality, this could be 5 people.
It could. We did receive, or the Board of County Commissioners did receive a petition from several dozen residents of the Watkins Farm area expressing concerns about a specific well. It's not currently under development. Conoco actually withdrew that application about 9 months ago. So, but
hellacious discussion about that on and on and on and on. Here they weren't even there no more. We should have been told that up front. We wouldn't have wasted time talking about it.
Right. So,
okay.
Yes. Thank you for your
adjourned. I like that walk around with the.
That's very efficient.
The same time.
I say it's very rock star.